Hello and welcome to another episode of Climate Change Roundtable. This week we will be discussing how the SEC is going woke on climate change and how the digital dollar that's being explored, I believe by 80% of now global markets, is a huge threat to actual climate realism and just liberty throughout the world. So joining me this week are the usuals, Linnea Lueken and Sterling Burnett, but we have the Donald, the host of the In the Tank podcast. We got to do the and not the. How are you, Donald?
Oh, I'm doing wonderful. I'm not used to not being the host, though, so I might just take over at some point. I'm not
You're
sure.
just going to switch yourself to. Whoa,
all right.
In my chair. Well, welcome to not hosting. Welcome to the show. And Sterling, Linnea, how are you both?
Doing well. Beautiful white day here in Texas. Ready to take on the SEC.
Oh, for sure. So let's just jump right into it. Sterling, you put out a piece on humanevents.com titled "The SEC Goes Woke on Climate Change, Abandons Mission to Protect Investors and Markets." I was wondering if you could just give us a brief, overview of what you mean. Like, so what is the SEC doing? How are they entering the climate change debate?
Well, the Securities Exchange Commission was formed, way back in response to the stock market collapse in the 30s, 1929, and they wanted to weed out insider trading, false advertising, basically stock offerings being offered with bald-faced lies as claims. They were trying to protect investors, especially small investors. Now, for years, it has been doing this, and sometimes it updates its policies to say you've got to report on this, or your reports need to be more complete. And then they work with the Justice Department to investigate claims of insider trading or market manipulation, things like that. Now, rather than worrying about investors, they are directing businesses as to what they must take seriously when they do this reporting.
Yeah.
So in this case, they're saying more important than profits, more important than your future business prospects, or at least more important than anything else to those things, is climate change. And so according to these new rules, the SEC is requiring every publicly traded corporation, it's not clear where they get this power from, but they're requiring them to report on what their carbon dioxide emissions are, and to act as big brothers for everybody through their supply chain. So they've got to report on the carbon dioxide emissions of everyone in their supply chains, and report on it. Of course it is, and report on the carbon dioxide emissions of everyone of their electric utility. Like they have a choice of the electric utility in states that have monopoly electric utilities. Going further, they must predict how they think climate change, based on what, will affect their operations in the future, and what they are doing to mitigate any harms from climate change. Yeah. Now, of course, when this reporting is incomplete, as it will have to be, since most of the people in many of these corporations' supply chains aren't controlled by the SEC. In fact, many aren't even in our country. The SEC will sue them or fine them, or because you've got these activist groups that will now be taking these reports and saying, you're not doing your job, so we'll protest and sue you, which is what it's really all about. It's about getting big corporations to force small people to spend lots and lots of money.
Yeah. I say that makes sense. That doesn't make sense. I was totally going to put the exact wrong words in there.
No, it makes perfect sense if what you're really about is not protecting investors or businesses in the economy. If what you're really about is controlling people, it makes perfect sense if that's what it's about.
So this reminds me, and correct me if I'm getting this kind of wrong here, but during the Obama era, was it the IRS that was targeting more right-wing nonprofits or something and selectively applying rules to those? This sounds like another example of where that's going to happen, where the SEC is going to target, not all oriented or left-wing, big corporations to a degree. That's kind of a weird statement.
The thing is, there are many, as the SEC says, there are many corporations that are already doing this, at least for themselves, and some of them are doing it for their supply chain, and it's within their right to do so.
Yeah.
No one disputes that if that's what you think is going to affect your business prospects, you can report on that and you can focus on that. The question is, should every corporation in America be forced to focus on that to the exclusion of other things and spend their resources? How will that affect retirees' incomes?
So is this
it will go down. How will that affect the supply chain when Argentinian beef providers to fast food restaurants here in this country say, sorry, we ain't doing it. We can ship our beef elsewhere. China's a big market. The supply chain crisis we have right now will look small by comparison.
So is this like requiring the E of like the ESG stuff through the SEC?
It is. And it's not just the SEC. I mean, right now it's the SEC, but other agencies are doing similar things. The Office of Comptroller of Currency is issuing rules to this to similar effect for banks. So how are they going to report on every one of the people they make loans to, their carbon emissions? How do you track that? And think about this. So let's take, just use Walmart as an example. Walmart is this huge retailer, right? It gets electronics and from all over the world. It gets clothing from all over the world. It gets groceries from all over the world. Not only do many of the entities that provide them with these things they're not bound by SEC, even many domestic entities, because they're not publicly traded corporations.
Yeah.
So what are they to do? I mean, literally, what are they to do? And how does this, how is this going to work? It's just not. It's not going to work.
Yeah, the ESG thing, it's like we've even had pushback from people that are on the right side of the aisle where it's like, well, in America, at least, ESG is voluntary. These corporations just do this. They don't have to do it, but it's just voluntary, right? And of course, we've reflected on, or we've talked about in Europe where they're actually codifying this into law. And it's like, when I'm looking at this, it's like, okay, well, now they're parting 1/3 of it is going to be required. So
I was about to say,
into mandates.
Oh
here.
yeah, no, don't be. Let's be clear. This is just their work on the E part of it. They've got rules coming down the pipe on the S and the G, right? They've got equity concerns. In fact, environment justice is one of the concerns that's rolled into this. So this is big, and I can't overstate. Like I said, anyone who wants to take this into account, any company that says I'm green, we're cutting our emissions, they're welcome to do so, and the SEC should hold their feet to the fire if they say they're doing that, to make sure that they're actually doing what they're saying. They're telling investors they're doing what they're telling investors are doing. But if I'm a corporation and I say, look, I don't think climate change is a big concern. I'm the dominant stockholder of a corporation. I don't think climate change is a big concern. That's not something I want to waste resources on. That should be my business. And you know what? Investors can punish me if they think it's so important that I do this. They can not buy my stock, or they can buy my stock and then go to shareholder meetings and put up resolutions or offer people to take over my board. And then we let the people decide. But what the SEC has no business whatsoever doing is telling everyone, because it's never done this before, by the way, that that this business concern, climate change and future climate change, by the way, I've never seen the SEC have any seers. I can see the people with crystal balls in the SEC right now looking over, climate change, the seas are going to rise. It's like, hold it.
Yeah.
There's no evidence anything about what the future is going to hold. So how can you expect businesses to do so and fine them or penalize them if they don't anticipate what the future looks like? And what happens if they get it wrong? Are they then going to be punished for that?
I want to give a shout out to Steven in the comments. He's just putting joke after joke in there, and they're pretty funny. But Sterling, so you wrote this article for humanevents.com, obviously about the SEC doing this. How which obviously required research. How much is there out there in the mainstream media about this movement by the SEC? Because this is a big story. This is the environmental aspect of ESG no longer being voluntary and actually becoming required. Did you see a lot about this?
In the in the mainstream media, not so much. In the corporate media, not so much. Now, to be fair, we have a little sort of historic event going on in Ukraine right now that is dominating some headlines. But the truth is, this is huge, and it's just one factor. I've seen nothing about the OCC. I've seen a little bit about this. I'm getting some radio play on it, but and other people are writing on it. But unless you go to sort of conservative websites, if they're not being censored by Facebook or Google or whatever, YouTube, whatever, it's hard to find anyone writing about this. Some business journals are taking this seriously. Law journals are taking this seriously. But how many of the general public read business journals and law journals?
I would argue very few. Linnea, you're pretty skeptical about things like this, like I am. Do you think there's any chance that this happened now because the whole Ukraine Russia war is going on, and they're just it's a good time to slip under something that is huge, like Sterling is saying. Well, no one discusses it.
It's the same thing as our later topic with digital currency. There's no reason why they should be doing this right now. It is because there is a bigger issue that's prominent to the average person. But I want to point out that this whole change, this ESG stuff, all of it's a shift towards what the World Economic Forum and what the movers and shakers in investment industry like BlackRock are interested in, which is stakeholder capitalism. Stakeholder capitalism does not care what the shareholders want. It does not care about the profits for the company or anything like that. What the point of stakeholder capitalism is what they'll say is that the public has an interest in what a company does because it impacts them down the line. What it actually is the government has an interest in how they would like a corporation or any kind of small business to proceed with their work. And they will frame it as, this is what the people want. So this is what you have to do as a business. And this has been a long time coming. I mean, you look all the way back to like the 2008 housing market crash with the way that they were doing those was like mortgage-backed securities investments. And the same people who are involved in that are the same people who are involved in this now. It is no coincidence. It is this ridiculous and totalitarian intentional shift to a great reset, let's say, of world economics. And it's all the same game.
Well, I feel like you're just teeing me up when you use the words great reset. So
there you go, Johnny.
I just want to reiterate that one point that you talked about, the difference between shareholder capitalism and stakeholder capitalism, because, one thing that one side of the aisle is really good at is the linguistical battle. And,
that's actually so true.
Yeah. And when they talk about how like the capitalism that we're in right now is just for profit at all costs.
Yeah.
And then the stakeholder capitalism is going to take everybody's, needs and wants into account, when in reality, it's the complete opposite. The capitalism that we have now is driven by individuals voting with their dollars and giving money towards companies that provide the best goods and services and all of that.
Well, more or less.
More or less.
We've been edging towards the worse version of that.
Sure.
In a theoretical sense, we should be. Yeah.
But the shareholder capitalism is basically just using this little fake representation of what stakeholders want, when it's actually a list of a wish list created by global elites. Like you already mentioned, the World Economic Forum.
Yeah,
they're the ones that are making the metrics.
Let's be clear. It's not capitalism. We can they want to call it shareholder capitalism because generally capitalism is what our market is, but that's not what it is. When you have someone who's not who doesn't have a real financial interest in directing a company, controlling it, that ain't capitalism. Right. That is, you can call it communism. That is socialism. That is elitism. It is whatever you want to call it, but it ain't capitalism. It's phony capitalism. And the funny thing is, when they call it stakeholder capitalism, they already have an idea of which stakeholders count. Now, there's a very narrow group of people who are stakeholders that count, and it ain't the people, the millions of people who actually own the stock.
Yeah, and I will say that there's also, along with this Great Reset concept, is investment groups like the Principles of Responsible Investment that control trillions of dollars of investment.
Mhm.
And they have basically been telling people that, like, yeah, you want to invest in all this green stuff because there's going to be a major gains in green stuff. And the reason why is because they know that the government
It's
is
gonna
going to
force it.
pour more and more subsidies and money and by the bucket loads, trillions of dollars into these types of programs, which are just going to line the pockets of the people that are investing in these principles of responsible investment. So I don't even believe
it's
that
crony capitalism.
That's all it is. It's all about I don't think they're in it for the goal of trying to save the planet. They're in it to make some money.
Well, and it's
surprise.
It reminds
exactly.
me.
It's the least surprising thing in the world.
It reminds me a lot of when some communist state fails, like Venezuela or something. What do the communists call the type of government that Venezuela has?
Ooh,
They call it state capitalism.
Yes.
They say it's not communism, it's state capitalism, and
Right.
that's bad. And it's they pin it on there every single time, and it works two ways, right? They call it state capitalism or they call it stakeholder capitalism because it still has the word capitalism in it. So it doesn't make people cringe away from it quite as much.
Just like democratic socialism.
Yeah,
Got
exactly.
democratic in it.
I've heard it called inclusive capitalism before.
Oh, that one
Everyone's
hurt.
allowed to take part, unlike now when you're not actually allowed to go to the store and spend your dollars. And all right, going along the lines. Go Story.
You mentioned Venezuela. So my wife's from Venezuela, and I went to the second time I went to Venezuela. I saw Petrobras, which is, Petro Venezuela, I forget the name of the company.
Yeah.
But it's the state-owned oil company that took over all the private leases that had been basically seized, the private leases. Now, on an oil company, mind you, this is an oil company. Its intention is to produce oil and gas, and right now make a profit for the government.
Yeah.
If you go to Exxon, you might see a motto like "Put a tiger in your tank." You go to different corporations and see what their motto is. The motto of the Petro Venezuela oil company, and it's on all their big buildings, is Socialismo, Revolución, or Muerte, which is socialism, revolution, or death. That's the corporate motto. Wow.
That is
nice.
That is not exactly somewhere I'd like to work. Like socialism, revolution, or we're
or death,
taking you out like Old Yeller.
Yeah.
Moving forward.
Old Yeller.
Oh man, that's
there
my favorite.
Go.
Moving forward, so we've been saying that people aren't exactly stakeholder capitalism is the way that people aren't just voting with their dollars. It's the way that the governments decide what we want to do. But this is not my best transition in the world. But the second half of this podcast, I do want to talk about the future of the dollar, whether or not we're actually going to move forwards with a paper currency or we're going to move forwards with a digital currency, something that the Donald specifically has been working on a lot as part of the Stopping Socialism project. Donald, I was hoping you could just kind of give us a brief update about what is this digital dollar before we move into why it's a threat to climate realism.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a lot to say about this, but at the same time, there is, I want to preface this all with this idea that right now we're kind of in a theoretical realm right now.
Yeah, we were having this discussion the other day.
Yeah. So it's more about just kind of like talking about the potential that some of this. Okay, who's dancing over here?
Get on my dancing shoes.
Yeah. So the concept of a central bank-backed digital currency has been something that's been floating around for a while now. I think I've heard about China testing something out like this like years ago. Mm-hmm. So whenever something starts off as an idea in China, it's a good idea. Andy's laughing off screen.
There's a hilarious comment.
so then other central banks around the world have been following suit. Andy, you mentioned like 80% of central banks across the world are like testing some of this out, or at least like putting some research into this. And the United States is among those 80%.
Yeah.
So they've been, this has moved a little bit quicker in some other countries. The UK has been kind of pushing forward with this. The United States has been to a degree. The Federal Reserve released a paper that was kind of exploring the pros and cons of this concept earlier this year. But, generally speaking, at least in America, it hasn't really been going very quickly, which isn't a surprise to me because nothing the government does goes quickly.
What, Joe Biden, his brain is like nonstop firing.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Down?
So until recently, so Joe Biden signed an executive order earlier this month. No, actually it's April now. So earlier last month that put like really quick timetables on trying to move this concept of a central bank backed digital currency forward faster than I would have guessed that it would. So in this executive order, it says 180 days from the time the executive order was signed that they want some more research done by the Treasury, done by the Secretary of State or something like that, the Federal Reserve. They want this report done. Basically, how would we do this? What it would look like, that type of thing, done in 180 days. And then also from the time that the executive order was signed, a 210-day timeline of basically potential proposed legislation being on Joe Biden's desk so the White House can, look at it or whatever. So the breakneck speed of this, the sudden breakneck speed of this raised some big red flags for us. So that's just kind of the context of all of this.
Yeah.
If you want to kind of get into the difference between a digital currency like this and crypto, we can go in that direction.
Let's Sterling, are you raising your hand there?
You're muted. I muted him. Sorry. Go ahead, Sterling.
I don't know if you know, Donnie, that did you see that Elizabeth Warren today said we must move to a digital currency on TV in a big interview? I sent out a notice earlier today on it. She's saying we've got to do it.
Okay.
Really?
And we got to do it now, she says.
Yeah. I do think we should briefly discuss the difference between a digital currency and a cryptocurrency, because for a lot of people, cryptocurrencies are like the anti-government thing. It's a currency completely outside the realm of the Federal Reserve, of government control.
When we were working on the Great Reset book with Glenn Beck, and this concept of a digital currency came up. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, Blaze, that thing. When I was doing research on it, just from ignorance, I kind of looked at digital currencies and cryptocurrencies as two interchangeable terms.
Yeah, I did too initially.
And the more that I've been looking into it in just the past few weeks, if not maybe a month, it's been very clear that they're two very distinct things. Cryptocurrencies are generally very decentralized, very protected against manipulation and all that type of stuff.
That's the key word there.
There's even an amount of privacy that goes along with cryptocurrencies. All qualities that the government doesn't want behind their currency. So digital currencies, on the other hand, are likely, the way that these can materialize is very broad. We don't know yet. Like I said, we're in speculation realm here. But generally speaking, you can expect it to be very centralized, very controllable, and the privacy completely done out with. So there's a huge difference when I hear people talking about, the government wants to get in the crypto realm. That's not the case. Don't let people say that. It's going to put a different connotation on this whole thing. In reality, they want a currency that is even more manipulatable than the currency that we currently have.
So what I really want to get into here is what risks does this have? Like, what power is this going to give the government that they don't have right now with a paper currency?
Yeah. What kind of manipulations can they do?
Yeah.
So just the first thing that I'll mention is just the privacy thing, because this is something that they're outwardly talking about. They'll bring up conversations about how, with the dollars that we have, it's really hard to track, terrorist payments or something. That's something that you'll see all of the time, right?
Okay, because that's a huge...
with a digital currency, you can expect it to be fully trackable. There would be no anonymity when it comes to this type of thing. So that's
like buying McDonald's or something.
That's one thing. Andy, we don't know. Maybe you're funding terrorism. We don't know that. We got to be able to track all of your dollars.
Okay, fair enough. And
so
I am. But...
So beyond that, though, and this is something that came to me, was a shock. It was actually a debate that was going on in Parliament of the UK or something like that. Where they're a little bit further ahead with this plan for a digital currency, and they were talking about the idea of having smart contracts and programmable money. So in this scenario, which, the people were very worried about over there, at least according to the conversations that I was reading, the idea that you could release money, the government could release money with strings attached, literally encoded into the money that they're given, that can determine whether or not you can spend it on certain products, spend it at certain times of the day, even. Any number of things could be restricted when you're using this type of currency. It's a really crazy concept, but the idea of smart contracts does exist within cryptocurrency, so it's becoming more of an established thing. But you can imagine how this could be used even for things that you might even defend. Maybe a social welfare check or something is sent to somebody, and it has strings attached that says you can only buy these certain types of products, essential foods, that type of thing with this. But then, I'm a very cynic when it comes to anything related to the government and stuff like this.
That's a good trait.
That's a good trait. So you could just imagine all of the different implications that this could possibly have. Maybe they restrict the amount of gasoline that you could put into your car or something like that, or make sure that you only buy products from
credits.
maybe you buy only can buy stuff from companies and corporations that have an ESG score of this or higher, or something like anything is possible. So it's like we talk about these things. We talk about the ESG scores as a way of the government to kind of control the economy and society by extension. This would be able to do that, but at such a granular level that it could theoretically impact individuals like us or anyone listening to this.
Going from Sterling and the SEC straight to this, it gave me a thought here. If the government really could track exactly what we spent our dollars on, and these companies, due to the SEC, public companies had to have report all of their carbon emissions and everyone in their supply chain, I could theoretically see a future here where the government sees like what companies that you're spending your money with, and then basically giving you a score,
generating you a score.
Yes, right. Exactly. But then if they have control of your currency, they could alter essentially, well, maybe prices go up for you in certain fields because you're causing so much emissions of carbon dioxide due to where you're spending your money. We're going to need to use more government dollars to clean it up.
You could theoretically attach certain interest rates to specific people, even. Just imagine the power that could have. Like, it's literally limitless. And like I said, we don't even know the details of this type of stuff. I want to reiterate this point. The reports and all of that are supposedly going to be 6 months out from when the executive order. We won't pretty much know anything until those reports start coming out. But I like to expect the worst but hope for the best. So that's why I'm sounding the alarm on this so early.
Yeah.
If they phase out paper currency or coins, whatever, for the digital currency, it ends all private transactions, right? You go to a garage sale, or you have a friend who's having some financial trouble, and you want to buy a firearm from him to help him out, right? He's got a gun safe. He says, "Look, I'm trying to get rid of some arms to pay my mortgage. Can you help me out?" No. How? And it's a huge benefit for the taxing authority, right? Because if they do allow somehow, everyone has some way of going to the system and still doing private exchanges like garage sales or whatever. Every transaction will be known, so every transaction is theoretically taxable. Remember, they're taxing your online purchases now, right? How long will it be before the states say, "Oh, we're losing money to garage sales. We've got to tax private exchange"? And of course, like I said, we can no longer theoretically, by law, you can still buy firearms with high capacity things, but your digital currency won't let you buy anything that's not a single shot.
Yeah, that's a way that you can do
all sorts of things with it.
And it's also worth noting that this executive order was alongside it. This was actually kind of a smaller component of it, but it was the whole executive order was about more regulations and stuff on cryptocurrency. Because the situation that you're painting, the situation that you're painting, Sterling, it's like cryptocurrency would be your alternative if everything was digital and all of that. And I've seen, I think it's the head of the European Central Bank talking about how cryptocurrencies shouldn't be treated like currencies. They should be regulated like assets. So it just shows that they're very antagonistic towards this because it does serve as almost a backdoor around this type of digital currency that's being talked about.
Well, and I'd like to point out as well, the conservative media and everyone jumped all over the IRS when they were talking about how they wanted to track anyone's bank account and all exchanges in and out of their bank account if they have more than $600 in the bank, right? And everyone was all over this. Well, with a digital currency, that'll be so much easier to do.
No doubt.
And the who was it recently? They're talking about taxing gosh, I can't think of the word right now, but you own stocks, but you haven't
unrealized
yes,
gains.
unrealized gains. They're talking about that. They're talking about all this stuff. Well, if you buy all this with this digital currency, it'll be so much easier for them to track all of it. I mean, there's nothing that you could do. And I want to point out too that even with the system that we have now, where so much of our banking is digitized, it was easy in Canada for the Canadian government to shut down the trucker protests' bank accounts because they're illegally protesting the government. And they shut down their ability for many of these people as soon as they identified them to access their credit card accounts,
right,
or any of their bank accounts, to try and starve them out to keep them out of their blockade. So it's terrifying, the thought of how far they could go with this. I mean, it's the ease at which they could seize assets for terrorism or whatever, and
crimes against the climate.
with their climate crimes. And you see how broad, especially on the left, their definition of who is like some kind of a threat to the government or an anti-government person. I mean, I think that the left's definition would include all of us on this podcast.
Well,
spreading misinformation.
Some of the things they're talking about, building in equity concerns into your cryptocurrency. So dollars for some people will be worth more than dollars for other people. I mean, I'm not saying they'll do that. We don't know.
Well,
it's a possibility. And,
yes.
And this gives them, I honestly think this currency thing gives them a power that no authoritarian has ever had.
A delete button.
Detailed control how you live your life.
Yeah.
You almost, if you don't want to live under this, you almost have to live solely in the black market and go back to barter somehow. Like you say, cryptocurrency or barter.
Yeah.
And that is scary, that a modern society would take us back to barter and exchange to get out of being detailed control of your life.
So let's just remember to refer to the government's plan, the central bank-backed digital currency, as a digital currency and not a cryptocurrency. I want to make that very clear. Yeah. But you brought up a point that I forgot to bring up, which was in the executive order and the little fact sheet that they released with the executive order, and even some of the White House spokespeople have talked about how they're venturing into this kind of research phase of this digital currency, and they're going to make sure that everyone's viewpoints are taken into account. And they brought up the ideas of equity and inclusion, and then they even talked about meeting with industry and labor and environmental groups. And it's like, if this is just going to be a simple replacement of the dollar, and it's going to be no different than us using our debit card, why are any of those groups being involved? So to me, that sends a signal that this concept of it being programmable is definitely on top of mind.
Yeah. It seems like the bare minimum here. I mean, obviously they're going to use this to take a lot of control, but it gives them a greater degree of awareness in everything you do, and the ability to remove money from your account easier. If they directly control the currency, they definitely can delete it. I'm trying to think. Is there anything more here we should? I do have something. So I was reading about the Congress eCash Act yesterday, which is just one of the congressional acts towards instituting a digital currency. And one thing that they said in there is that it would not be required it would not be required for a financial institution or the government to be an intermediary in your transactions. And the way that they can sell that is that, well, it's still cash, it's still private. We're not in between. You can still do your own thing. Well, with the way that cryptocurrencies work is every transaction is put on a ledger. So even if two people aren't, it's an uncentralized ledger, and if you don't actually know who's doing the transaction, you don't know where the two things are going. But every transaction can be tracked. Now, if they have a way of putting out these digital coins and they can track essentially like where the initial coins went, even if they're not an intermediary in there, they'll still be able to see the location that it started and the location it ended and figure out who made these transactions, where to go. So they're going to sell this to us as if, oh no, you're still going to keep all the anonymity that you originally had, but the way is to put backdoors in there where really they can track everything.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I have no doubt about that.
Yeah, it's
and even with the cryptocurrency where they can, like there is that decentralized ledger technology where they can actually track where things are going.
Yeah,
the wallets that you have are basically anonymous. You know it by just the website, the wallet address. I don't know if that's associated with you or Sterling or Linnea. It's still pretty anonymous. But
you can see the location. You can see because it alters the hash function associated with the cryptocurrencies, with the Bitcoin or whatever. But you don't actually know who's on each end. So while it's a publicly accessible ledger, unless you know where it started and who's there, you don't know anything. It's anonymous.
Yeah. Everybody. If this goes through, the digital currency is going to be like a card. It's going to be like a food card, that the food stamps. They don't have stamps anymore. They have these cards. Everyone's going to have a digital reader.
Yep.
And I can't speak for all of you, but sometimes electronics go down. At least at my end. And when they do, so I've got a digital currency and I need to buy some medicine, and sorry, the power went off, or our reader's not functioning properly.
The power went off because the sun's not out right now.
yeah. Or our reader's not functioning properly, or that's the excuse they use when they don't take your reader because the government said we're not taking this.
Yeah.
Think about all the implications of this. This is just scary
it's huge.
Stuff.
Oh, huge. Donald, your comment just gave me the worst, flash forward to, because the green infrastructure idea that pretty much calculates into the equation that we're going to have rolling brownouts and blackouts. They just kind of plan for that to happen, like California does now, and Germany. The idea that we could have days where you literally just can't access your bank account because, today is a no electricity day because, it rained yesterday and we don't have enough power. That is just the biggest nightmare I could possibly. You can't charge your Tesla today because there's no electricity. You can't access your bank because there's no electricity. Oh my gosh, what a nightmare.
Someone's pointed to the bright side of this, though. If you have children, you can look at your child and say, sorry, I'd like to give you an allowance, but it just doesn't work for things
we
like
haven't
that.
registered a digital wallet for you yet.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a huge story, and obviously it's not going to be talked about like this in the corporate media, nor is the whole SEC thing, as you said, Sterling. It's just not out there right now. So we will keep you all updated on it.
Well, can I mention one thing? I was going to bring this up earlier, but I thought it might have been too much of a tangent.
No, I love tangents. Get into the
Sterling talking about how even some you might not even see this on some conservative websites, and this is something that I'm aware of, and it probably should be said on every one of these podcasts. Which is, we have a guy here that is in charge of just distributing op-eds around. Mm-hmm. And he has gotten notes back from conservative websites, I won't name them specifically, that said, we can't take this climate-related op-ed. Because if it gets shared on our social media, it gets shared on Facebook, and most of these websites do this all automatically, then our entire page could be like shadow banned to an extent. And the reach that all of our articles over the course of, I don't know how, a period of time, will have substantially less eyes being put on them. So, even if conservative websites are balking at the idea of hosting a climate change related thing because of what social media is doing, A, it shows you how powerful social media is, but B, it also highlights the importance of going to websites like heartland.org or Heartland Daily News or climaterealism.com, all of these things where you could see these articles talked about that maybe your conservative website won't even host. So it's I think that's just a very important thing to
love
mention.
that comment so much. It both true and supports
really good
us.
Plug.
Nailed that one.
That's right.
Anyone else have any closing comments before we wrap this one up?
Not specifically, but I would say that if this goes through and if they really push this stuff harder and no one pays attention because they're too busy looking at Oscars clips, we're going to be in some trouble.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Next episode is going to be all about the slap. So
parallel economy is coming.
I put it into slow motion. I've been trying to figure out whether it's okay. I'm kidding. But all right. Well, let's wrap this one up for the week. Thank you all for joining. Donald, thank you for coming on the show this week. We very much appreciate it. Yeah. Sterling, Linnea, great job. And as always, subscribe to the show on YouTube. Hit the button and then hit the little bell as well. Then it notifies you when we go live. We are live every Friday at noon. I thought it was Thursday for a second. Usually I'm in the back end on Donald's show and I'm just like listening to him do his outro. So now in my mind, I'm conflating the two. Outside of that, subscribe, head to heartland.org, head to stoppingsocialism.com. And all right, have a great week.